We're gonna go over strength training for Taekwondo, and we're gonna start right now. What's Taekwondo? Okay, if we can just think about it, the simplest form, right? It's a crazy combat sport. There's a ton of hip mobility. There's a higher score for rotational kicks. There's kicks that have to be very, very precise. It's also done over 3 2-minute rounds with only 1 minute of rest, all right? And when you're looking at combat sports, you understand that you have to be extraordinarily explosive. You have to be elastic, right? We've got to be very quick, very agile. We also have to be in unilateral positions and applying a large amount of force in those unilateral positions so that we can be more successful out on the mat. We're also constrained to an 8-meter diameter circle, so we've got to exist in that specific circle. We need to understand our balance. We need to understand our speed. We need to understand our means of attack and how we can set up specific movement patterns to optimize our overall performance. That's some of the key factors that go into strength training for Taekwondo. We have to look at the sport for what it is. We have to look through the lens of what the confines are. And then as a strength coach, we need to build everything based off of those confines. We're not looking to deadlift 700 pounds. We're not looking to back squat 900 pounds. Those things will help us to a point, to a very small point. But in all reality, we're looking to be absolute physical specimens that are very, very mobile, very, very reactive. We also have to think, we're competing barefoot. Right? So we're gonna be in a position that's gonna be a little bit different. So oftentimes, I would even recommend training that way. But now, let's look at those specific strength characteristics that go into Taekwondo and how we can train them and optimize them through resistance-based training that is created through the absolute lens of strength training for Taekwondo. That first key aspect, it comes back to understanding the scoring, 1 point through 4 points and where the contact points need to be. The head, the torso, on the colors, right? We also understand that most of these things are going to happen while we're in a unilateral position. So there's gonna be a lot of agility that goes into this. There's gonna be a lot of dynamic trunk control. There's gonna be a lot of crazy hip mobility that we have to focus on. But the first key step is when we're introducing someone into Taekwondo is that we need to build into this by increasing their unilateral strength. So that first key characteristic is improving that unilateral strength so that the athletes are more confident. They're able to execute while standing on one leg. That's gonna mean doing things like offset single leg squats, curtsy squats, skater squats, even doing things like plyometrics in a unilateral position, doing rotational plyometrics in a unilateral position. If we can train unilaterally and we can start with basic, simple progressions, basic strength training movements in that unilateral position, and then as the athlete advances and becomes more mature as an athlete and as an individual, we can start to get more advanced with the movement patterns that we're gonna be training unilaterally. That might mean introducing different reflexive movement patterns that will increase their performance out on the mat. But when we're training specifically in the weight room, we have to look at it and identify, can single leg squats improve power output in that unilateral position? Can curtsy squats improve our patterns of movement so that we can have better change of direction? We can have better change of our levels. We can be more elusive and have better attacks. Yes, that second key characteristic is gonna be training our mobility. But when we're doing resistance-based training, we should probably be doing some substantial mobility work. And there's some research that when we're doing, let's say, a back squat or a single leg squat or even a pull-up, that doing some type of strengthening in between those sets will lead to better performance of the strength-based exercise, and it can increase our overall limber ability, our overall ability to be more elastic in joint capsules. So when we're looking at training mobility, we want to lengthen the muscles around that specific joint. If we have problems inside of our hip, that will be an issue as a fighter, as a Taekwondo athlete, right? So we need to make sure that our hips are extraordinarily mobile. And then that's going to lead to our third key aspect. We want to focus on speed and dynamic trunk control. We want to be able to attack with a kick without really leaning all over the place, without really changing our trunk angle. We want to change our trunk angle on an attack, but if we have that unilateral stability and we're mobile in our hip, we can attack with a wild amount of speed because of that dynamic trunk control. So that might mean doing specific plyometrics with a band. That might mean doing specific plyometrics with a kettlebell. That might mean doing some offset work. That might be as simple as doing walking lunges with a plate overhead. These are all different ways to train speed and dynamic trunk control. But even doing plyometric series where you jump off of 2 feet and you land on 1 foot, that's another phenomenal way to train that speed that will then carry over to whatever it is that you need to do out on the mat. I would recommend though, looking at your movement patterns with your coach, analyzing where you struggle to execute, and then using resistance-based training from a unilateral perspective, from a speed and dynamic trunk control perspective, through a mobility lens to improve your patterning then out with your technique on the mat against your opponents. And then finally, we're gonna get into power-based endurance. 3 2-minute periods, 1 minute rest. This is highly intense work. It's not as challenging as if we were going out and running a 10K or something along those lines. That's a challenge on a different level. But when we're focusing on like 3 periods of 2 minutes, we're gonna have to have a very, very high level of aerobic capacity. And while we have a very high level of aerobic capacity, we have to have a very big reserve to pull from with our alactic system so that we have that speed, so that we have that dynamic trunk control, so that we have power endurance. So I recommend doing things like high intensity interval training, sprint interval training, and then probably once or twice a week, long, slow distance work. That's gonna be 40 to 45 minutes. That's gonna increase your overall aerobic capacity. But if we can do some sprint interval work, let's say we get on the assault bike 10 to 15 seconds, as hard as we can go, rest for 45 seconds, that's gonna increase that power reserve. If we're in the 5th minute and we need to score some crazy points, we need to get in position, if we have more speed in that 4th and 5th minute, that's gonna help us, 1, with our attacks, but 2, with our defensive positions. So we've gotta look through those lenses, okay, of what the strength characteristics are that are gonna be needed for the sport of Taekwondo. We need to look at it as an athlete, as a coach, and say, this individual lacks this specific movement pattern. And when they lack that movement pattern, we need to bring that into our training system and then see what ends up happening out on the mat, and then slowly plug and play over a long period of time. This is stuff that we do inside of our app, Peak Strength. If you head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store, or the Apple iOS Store, you can pick up Peak Strength today for 7 free days of training, and you can cancel at any time. The worst thing that's gonna happen is you're gonna get 5 free days of training specific to Taekwondo work, because at some point, you have to begin that journey to attain peak strength. Freaks, if you want to become a champion, you've always got to cultivate your power. Peace.